I am here with my good friend Joris, who is a long-time kiter. He has been kiting since 2004. He founded both the London and New York kite surfing clubs, which now host over 2,000 members. He had his own kite surfing brand at one stage, and in addition to that, he hosts the annual kite surfing trip to Kenya. So of course is one of the most prolific members of the kite surfing community, probably globally. So really happy that he took some time out in his short stay in New York to meet with me. I should also say that this is pretty personal for me, in that one of the big reasons that I founded Journey and I'm trying to build this business and this movement is that I arrived in New York City 2.5 years ago, and I had just gotten into kite surfing in Sydney and had gotten good enough that I really, really loved it. And I got here and I couldn't find anybody to do it with. I didn't know where to do it. I didn't know how to go about doing it. I didn't know how to find people that did it. And eventually I found my way into what started with a kite surfing kiters drinks, and then into a WhatsApp group called NYC Kiters that is incredibly active, has some great people in there, and I thought, geez, it would have been nice if I could have found that a bit easier. And so that really started the ball rolling with the ideation behind Journey and how can we make that experience better for somebody that either is learning something or has moved to a new city to build that community. So Joris, first off, for those that don't know what kiting is, do you want to just give us a quick rundown of kiting itself as a sport?
Yeah, so kiteboarding they call it kiteboarding in the US, they call it kite surfing more in Europe, and it's sort of a mix between snowboarding and windsurfing. Like people know a kite, you fly a kite on the beach when you're young, it's a small kite. The kite you actually use for kiteboarding is a inflatable kite, so it can actually float on water. And it's a big kite, generally like 9 to 12 square meter big, and it's got long lines, 24 meters lines that are attached to your body in a harness, and you use the wind and therefore the propulsion and the strength of the kite to bring you forward on the water on a small board. Boards can be like 140 centimeters, or a lot of people nowadays also use surfboards, and they use it to ride waves instead of paddling out. They actually can use the kite to get into the wave and ride the wave as a normal surf.
And so, and that's it's probably a good point to delineate between kite surfing, which a lot of people would refer to that as kite surfing, as in surfing waves with a kite, as opposed to kiteboarding, which is more like wakeboarding, I guess, but being pulled along with a kite. Is that fair to say?
It's more in the US, it's very much more in distinction, like between kiteboarding being a board, small board, and using the wind to ride with a small board, and then riding the waves, they call it kite surfing. But if you go to Europe, it's very much more that people refer to it as kite surfing, both on what they call twin tip, a small board, or riding a wave on a normal surfboard.
Gotcha. All right. Before we were rudely interrupted by some overly officious highline workers, you were telling me about what you thought about kiting when you moved to New York, as in whether you thought it was going to be possible. And
yeah, so I think it's what I was saying is that I didn't want to look at the actual kiting spots in the kiting arrangement within New York, because I was just being afraid that maybe one day, maybe there wasn't nothing, and I would be like, we went to New York because of my wife's job, and it was exciting and everything else, but I couldn't deal with the disappointment that wouldn't be any kite surfing or kiteboarding in the area.
So you were really worried at this stage. You're like, I'm moving to this city, and I've fallen in love with kiting and set up the London community, done all these great things, and now you move into a city that probably doesn't have it.
Yeah, and I knew I was going to miss it. So I think but then we came in November. We came to New York. This was about 2 years ago, and we had to look for a house. And then I got in touch with a friend of a friend who was in New York, and then I sent him a message like, hey, I'm in New York, and what's the kiting like in New York? And he said oh, I just came back from Shelter Island, which is like somewhere on Long Island in New York. And oh, great, so there's something going on.
And then I came the next year. I came to New York, and I knew when I was stopped running the club in London that I might get bored or whatever, maybe miss the kind of community of it. And that's just the reason I started the New York Kiteboarding Club. And I started from scratch with basically 0 members on Meetup, and built it up in a sort of the same way as I was running the London kite servers. But it was also exciting in a sense that because I learned a lot of things, how to do things and how not to do things, and therefore setting up the New York club was a bit easier, and they maybe did it in a slightly different way as well.
Because you had those learnings from when you did it in London.
Correct.
And London is 1,700 members strong,
yes.
And you've got to New York to 250 or thereabouts.
Yes, so we started last year March with basically 10 people coming to the kite rinks. We run.
Was it last year in March? That was.
Yeah, April, yeah. I think 5th of April. I think was the first one.
I was at that one. That was the one I went to.
Yeah, probably. Yeah.
Gosh, that's amazing. And so, how did you find? Firstly, did you find that person that was at Shelter Island through a friend of a friend from the London community?
Yes, correct. Yeah, it was a girl I used to kite with a lot in London,
yeah.
Or the London area basically, and she met him on some trip, and that's of course with people that don't know much about kite surfing, that there's a lot of people going on trips to Brazil, to Kenya, to South Africa, to the Philippines to kite, and then you tend to know people, sort of common kind of friends, because people have been traveling basically.
I think it's worth mentioning that there's these particular beaches or parts of the world that have consistent wind and generally attract kiters, or because of that, and there's not too many. It's still, I think, a very fast-growing sport, but it's a sport that there's, no matter which city you're in, you pretty quickly get to know the local kiters because you're all going to the same spots.
Yes.
Okay, and so when you arrived in, I just want to keep going down this. Well, I'll go back and ask you about your entire history and your entire journey in a minute. But whilst we're on the New York subject, when you got here, how did you even find out that you could, where the spots that you could go, or you didn't have the community then, you just rocked up.
Yeah.
How did you even find what to do?
It's interesting because now when I started kite surfing in London, and I was living in London at the time, just back in 2007, there was nothing really happening. The sport was less popular, so there were less people kiting. Everybody knew someone who was kiting, but it was always like difficult to meet up because you have your own life and your own commitments, right? And then Facebook was there, but there weren't many Facebook groups. There weren't many. WhatsApp didn't exist even, or wasn't even widely used. And we started out in London with a Facebook Messenger group, which grew very quickly. But now, maybe after 2 years, it died because the WhatsApp group came up. But now, when I came to New York, it was very much that the Facebook groups were there, and there's a Facebook group run by a guy called Adrian. He's doing a great job, really moderating it very well, and it's got about 1,300 people. So as soon as you know one person in a city who is a kiteboarder, who is probably on all the groups, and you get introduced to those groups, you can see where people are going, where the spots are, what the wind is doing. So it's a very good way to be informed about the local kind of situation or local conditions. And that's I also see it a lot with the people that come to the New York club. They come in and they don't know anything, they want lessons or supervision, whatever, and most of them they can already kite. Yeah. But the only reason is that they want that because they don't feel comfortable.
Yeah.
And I tell them, come to the beach next week with the people you met on the kite rinks, and then the next time you see them on the kite rinks, they act like they've been there for years.
Yeah, yeah.
Like part of the group, part of all their buddies and everything else, and just feeling comfortable, getting the information, and everybody's willing to share it, so it's great.
Okay, now I would just love to hear about your journey with kitesurfing. I mean, we talked about your history and that you've been doing it from 2004, but tell me all about it. What made you get into it? Yeah,
so I grew up in Holland near the beach, close to Zandvoort, and then, that's a long time ago, but then a lot of people were windsurfing, and I never really got into the windsurfing. I really wanted to, but for some reason I never did. Also because it was an expensive sport, and I couldn't really afford it when I was like 15, 16. And then I also always enjoyed it. And being from Holland, I like being on the water basically. I like sailing, like swimming, so it's a sort of natural fit. And then I was always want to go to a place called Tarifa in Spain, which is near, basically near Seville, and which was always used to be a very popular windsurfing spot. And I also, because of the reason I was interested in the windsurfing but never did it, I wanted to go to Tarifa from a very young age. And then one day there was a Euro Cup football was going on in Portugal, and I got some tickets, and then we went to Portugal, and I said, let's make it a holiday and let's drive down to the Costa da Luz, it's called, in Spain, to Tarifa, and take some kite surfing lessons, which was still very early days, like 2004.
And so what made you were there for Euro anyway, but you thought and you knew it was a big previously windsurfing spot and now kite surfing, but what made you want to make that drive and go down there in the first place to learn it, to take lessons?
I can't really remember. I think I was sort of fascinated by the sport. I think, if you like water, you like surfing, and you always want to be a surfer, but where I grew up in Holland, there's no waves.
Yeah.
So it's just, it wasn't really possible. Maybe my friends that grew up in England, they could go to Cornwall or Wales, they were actually surfers, but for us it was more like wind-driven sport. And therefore I think it was just a cool sport, and also the same reason I probably started snowboarding after skiing a lot is that it was a new thing to learn, like it was interesting, like it was a new sport and it was interesting to go on. And 2004 was still, it'd been going on for a while by then, but it wasn't very popular yet.
Yeah.
And the kites are pretty crazy and scary, but
the tech has progressed a heck of a lot since then.
I think thinking about this question, I never thought about it, but I think I think it was because I always wanted to go to Tarifa, and now when I went to Tarifa, it was the thing to do. So I go to Tarifa. Now kite surfing is a new thing. Let's do that.
And so you had a few lessons. What happened after that?
So I had lessons in 2004. I never really got on the board or anything else because it's
just getting to know the kite.
Difficult conditions. The thing is, if you look at, for people starting on the journey of kite surfing, it's really like I always say, take 2 or 3 days of lessons, and then start practicing a lot.
Yeah.
So I had 2 days of lessons. Never really got on the board, and then I sort of stopped doing it, planning to do it going back home, and never really continued with it. And then a friend of mine, he had some lessons again in Tarifa in August 2007, I think. 7 it was.
So 3 years later.
3 years later, and he said, "Why don't you come over to Tarifa in Spain and we start practicing?" So he had some lessons. He bought some old gear, and then we just basically spent 12 hours a day together to learn how to kite. We didn't know what to do exactly, but we're just helping each other.
So you weren't having lessons at this stage. Now you were just there with the gear. You've already done the lessons, but that was 3 years ago. I imagine you'd forgotten a lot of that. Or did you do more lessons again?
No, I didn't do that. I think which is like now, if I speak to new members or people coming to the sport, I say, take some lessons. So it wasn't really, and me saying that not having any lessons is a bit cheeky.
I also think the gear mustn't have been nearly as good and very difficult to control in the wind. And being, it would have been even more dangerous back then.
Yeah, I think it was. But you don't realize that. Like people were a bit more adventurous maybe at that time as well. A bit more. People call it extreme sport, which it's a potentially dangerous sport, but you can do it very safe if you know what to do. At that time, it was more dangerous. But I think the extremity of it maybe came from there, that people that were doing it were maybe more pioneers. And I think I was probably more towards the back end of the pioneering, but I can still say I was sort of a pioneer.
No, I think so. And you're going 12 hours a day. How long was the trip? Like a week?
Yeah, about a week. So I think I spent, and the funny thing is, we went in 2007, for I think August 2007, and spent like 5 or 6 days in Tarifa, and every day we went to the beach to check the wind.
Yeah.
And there was nobody there, and there was no wind. And now after 2 days, we went into the internet cafe in town, and like, why are people looking at this colorful chart? And then like, oh, there's something like Wind Guru. It's actually a forecast of the wind. So nobody was on the beach, just us beginners, because we didn't have a clue.
Yeah.
So those kind of things you slowly find out, and if you don't know the community, you don't know the people, it's very hard to find that kind of information, basically.
And so, but you got good enough, by the sounds of things, in that trip to love it. Is that right? Like,
yeah, no, I think it was a mixture of like being on the beach, being on the water, spending time with your friend, and just like and trying learning something new. And it's quite addictive, the kite surfing. It's not for everybody, but a lot of people sort of get either obsessed by it or they want to keep doing, because you never stop learning.
Yeah.
And it's a great feeling as well when you're out on the water on your own with the kite. It's just
it's incredible.
It's the freedom.
Yeah. Okay, and so you go back to Holland after that. How did you keep it up? What did you do after that?
So in 2004 I was still living in Holland and didn't really do it. There were some spots, but I didn't do it. In 2007 I was already living in London.
Okay.
And then my friend was living in Spain, and so we sort of met up in Tarifa together to keep practicing. And also the interesting thing was that I sort of didn't think that you could actually kite in the UK, which is of course silly, because it's like it has beaches, has water, and it has wind.
Yeah, but having said that, you're living in London, what, an hour and a half minimum from the water?
Yeah.
So
that was one of the reasons. Yeah.
And so then you started. Is that when you started the London community?
And the London community started in 2009, but it was still low key, and then we sort of took over and made it more official back in 2012, I think it was. But I think for me, and that's how a lot of people have kind of journey of kite surfing, is that they actually are they all go on holiday and do it on holiday in a nice, beautiful, warm location, and then you realize that you only can do it on holiday, and unless you're very rich, you're not on holiday all the time.
Yeah.
So then you realize, they think, oh, maybe I should start kiting in the cold in Europe. And that's when and that's probably somewhere in maybe 2008, where I really started to go every weekend, or try to go every weekend, and really progress and do it at least once or twice a month.
Were you jumping on a train to Brighton, or how were you even doing that?
Yeah, there's a mixture of people. People have cars, but also a lot of people to go by train. If you live in the center of London, of course, it's much easier to go by train.
Yeah.
And but there's also there's always someone who has a ride or can pick you up from the station. And
I mean, that's where the community must have played such an important part in London, because it is so far away to get there. So
yeah, and I think that's also, and it's interesting because some friends of mine, they moved from London to Brighton, and they kind of miss the sort of community spirit of it, because they are. People locally on the beach, they go kiting and go home. Well, if you go all the way from London, you always meet up for a drink or have some food on the beach.
Make a day of it. Yeah.
So you really, you make a day out of it, and it really is like therefore the community is much stronger. And because you share the rides, like you drive to the coast 1-2 hours, you get to know each other a bit better. Because on the water you don't have you don't necessarily have time to talk. On the beach it might be too cold and rainy.
Yeah.
But then if you drive down with someone, you become sort of kite buddies.
Yeah, that's great. And I mean, it's a good segue to talk about, you mentioned that feeling of being on the water, just you and the kite, and how amazing that is, and the freedom of that. And you talked about community and how valuable that is in kite surfing. What else do you love about the sport? Like, what has made you do all of these things on that and stay on that journey?
I think one of the most important things about kite surfing or kiteboarding, and the reason that people keep doing it, is that you basically keep learning. You never stop learning. And the great thing is that if you have a beginner coming to the club and he does his first jump, and everybody's excited.
Yeah.
But then there's another guy who does some crazy tricks, and then he's excited, or other people are excited. So it's very hard to sort of get to your level, to sort of your ceiling. And even then, if you would end up to your ceiling, there's a new generation coming in and does more crazy things. So the sport keeps evolving, and part of it is because of the gear, the equipment. But a lot of things is about the ability of the people and the way they want to push themselves to go harder. And for me personally, I was riding with a sort of a younger kid, and he was much better than I was. And at that stage, I was sort of like the beginning stage of the club and the beginning stage of the community in London. I was happy to ride up and down, like, well, the jumping and crazy things are for the younger generation. But I went with a guy who was like 20 years younger, and I thought, like, well, I can do that. So he really pushed me to become much, much better. And then you see that, well, yeah, I can do that, why not?
In terms of when you started, or thinking about somebody that is starting, is there anything, what do you know today that you wish you knew back when you were getting started in kiting?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think there's a lot of things you want to know, and I think a lot of things you sort of need to know as well. But it's also sort of the beauty of it is that you don't know it. It's sort of the journey of learning, and you come in and you're sort of a novice or beginner, but then and you want to know these cool things, you want to know these interesting stuff, and you don't know, be on the spot. But then when you do know, you're the guy from the spot, so you're the cool dude. So it's sort of the mystery of getting into something. There's not much you have to know or need to know or want to know. I think it's a lot of people come in on the sport, say I've been a snowboarder, I have board control, but it's a whole different kind of ball game with the kite surfing. The kite itself, it's a dangerous piece of equipment, so you need to get used to that. So there's no really foundation that you really need, or a sport you have to have done, and
it doesn't matter who you are,
passion.
You can get started. There was one thing that surprised me actually when I did it for the first time, was that you think that it involves incredible strength, but actually all of the pull of the kite is in your harness around your waist, and you just need very minimal amount in your arms. Is there, if there's somebody that's watching this and they thought for a while, oh geez, I'd love to do that, but they just haven't, for whatever reason, gotten around to it, is there one thing that you could recommend that they do today to get started and build momentum?
Not really, I think it's really, like if you compare the physicality of the sports, like if you go wakeboarding, which is basically the same board, and you hang behind a boat, which is very physical, very tiring because you're being pulled by the boat, but the kite surfing is really, you're attached to the kite itself, so it's quite easy to handle. And there's no real kind of starting point where like, oh, do this first. You can watch the videos which will help you looking at other people and understanding how people do certain tricks or certain movements. It's very helpful to speak to people in just in the club or on the beach and asking what they're doing. And general kind of fitness or general kind of sports will help you a lot. Like I do yoga and I teach martial arts as well, and those kind of things will help me in my own kite surfing. The yoga, it makes you more flexible and more strength in your legs. The martial arts helps you with your movement and the way you approach things and the way you learn things. But if you play soccer or football or you play tennis, it doesn't matter. Like it's a totally different kind of muscles you use, and you have to build it up. And then when you do it a lot, and especially when I kite a lot and I ride a lot, by August, September time, my body's so strong, and so all the muscle memory is really there that everything goes much better than say in March where you sort of haven't been for the season or whatever.
You mentioned lessons before and the importance of lessons. Would be one of those things that you might, someone might do is just go and book a lesson if you're close to a coast, I guess.
Yeah, that's a funny anecdote that I tell this a lot. Like last year in March when we started the club in New York, there was one guy, a really cool guy. He came to the kite drinks, And he's like, I'm practicing. I'm learning. Oh, okay. Where are you learning? Yeah, I'm learning in the park. Which park? Staten Island. Okay. And everybody's like, well, you shouldn't be doing that. It's a bit dangerous. And he's also like, he was basically launching his kite in a very dangerous way. And he didn't have any lessons. And there were like
launching by himself.
Big two walls on both sides and do it by himself. So everybody's like, no, that's not a good idea. And then the funny thing was that the next month he came again, and some of the other guys came again, and everybody sort of generally happy he was still alive. And he came to me like maybe 2 months after that. He said, Joris, you are right. I should have taken some lessons. So, but the coming back to your question is that the best way, the most safest way is to sort of take 2 or 3 days of lessons. If you can, try and go to the Caribbean, Brazil, go to a nice spot, like if it's nice and warm, where the water is flat, the wind is pretty decent, and then they take a beginner's course of 2 or 3 days, and then stay for another week or 5 days to keep practicing.
I think that's great advice, and I mean, I think I look back to when you're in Tenerife, was it?
Yeah.
And you know the 12 hours on the water with your mate that you were spending out there, I'm sure sort of set you up for success, I guess, for the rest of your journey.
And I think it's great. Sometimes after maybe 2 or 3 days of lessons, maybe a year later, you can do some more lessons, some advanced lessons, and it really depends on the person. Some people want more lessons than others. Some people need more lessons. A lot of people want to be comfortable as well, therefore they take more lessons. Everything there's no wrong there. Like it's really like you just do what feels best for you and works best for you, your type of learning, there's a type of teaching you get, and then, but it's still, without the practice, you can't do it.
Of course. All right, now turning the conversation to success and goal setting, was there a particular vision that you had in mind when you got started as to what you wanted your journey with kite surfing or with kiting to kiteboarding to look like? And if so, what was it?
Yeah, I think everybody wants to be like maybe the Patrick Swayze of surfing and kite surfing and Point Break, the cool dude who can
maybe not the bank robbing though, but
no.
Yeah.
Rip the waves and be the best surfer, a kiteboarder, or a kite surfer in the area. That's sort of a goal, and that's why people probably also start, or they see it on their own local beach, or they see a competition like the King of the Air in South Africa, where they jump as high as they can, and then it gets people excited. So people want to get into it. And for me personally, I didn't set myself any goals. I was just sort of enjoying it, and it's also the way I sort of teach the martial arts. Like you have to have fun, you have to be able to enjoy it, and then you get better at it. So, but that's my own personal view. I think there's a lot of people they set goals for themselves, but they're kind of person that do that at home, in the office. They say, I want to learn Spanish within like 3 weeks, and they set themselves their goals. And a good friend of mine, he does exactly that, and he's like, and therefore he also progresses a lot. Like he's really, I want to learn this trick by this date. Yeah. Which is a great way of making progress. So it's really for the person themselves, and it really reflects your being as a person and your how you learn the best, like what kind of tuition do you need, are you a bit of a rebel, you just want to do it yourself. After those 2 or 3 days of lessons, when you know how the kites work and you also are aware of the safety and the danger aspect of it, then you find your own path.
And what about I guess what's next on your journey? Where do you want to take things?
I think I keep doing it, I guess. Like what I said before is that I enjoy the learning. You never stop learning. You always can improve. And it's a lifestyle. Like it's like it takes over your life. Well, my wife doesn't really appreciate that, but it takes over your life. And there's a lot of people who come to the club and are like, oh, I have to go home because I have a dinner party. And then after 3 months, they're all of a sudden on the beach like, well, why are you still here? Screw those non-kite surfing friends. And I think because of the wind, it's hard to make appointments with people because you sort of cancel it last minute because you want to go kiting.
Yeah, so I liken it to kind of powder days.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's really when the wind is up and consistent and strong, and it's just like a powder day for a skier or a snowboarder.
So it's still a continuous journey, and the people you kite with, every kiter has a different kind of skill, different kind of strength. So if you kite with different people and you see different people, there's something to aspire to.
Yeah.
And if your kiting buddies can do something specific, you want to learn that. If you see someone on the beach who can do something specific, you want to learn that. And then you keep growing yourself and have that sort of kind of ambition without setting a proper goal, basically.
And you mentioned how martial arts had sort of helped you in your approach to learning kiting. Is there anything in other aspects of your life that where kiteboarding has helped you in something in another area?
Like especially with running the club, like there's a responsibility in the club with about over 2,000 people. So the certain leadership skills you take away from there, they are very applicable to your normal life and your normal work. Like a lot of kite servers are having office jobs, professionals, whatever they do. There's a variety of backgrounds, but those kind of skills where you sort of like with the kite surfing in the community, social skills, they're very useful in an office environment as well.
Of course, yeah.
And especially when you run a club, and it could be any sports club, it could be any community, you deal with members, and members have questions. And sometimes those questions might be a bit repetitive, or maybe there's never a stupid question, but you have to deal with that. You have to be polite and courteous and professional, and that's something you really helps you just in your normal life to become a better person, to become a better professional, become a better manager, and now with the company I'm setting up in the US, really that kind of interpersonal kind of skills and intercultural kind of skills are very helpful and valuable to progress it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's worth mentioning that it might have been conveyed that this is your full-time job, running these communities, and kiting is your entire life. But maybe one of these days, Joris. But you're a businessman, and you're setting up the American leg of a European company, and that must take a heck of a lot of your time. And then you're doing all of this, on top of that.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think it doesn't. People always have the perception that it takes a lot of time. It takes time, but it's also more driven from your passion. So a lot of things for the club is just doing the sport you love to do, and therefore be present on the beach, and therefore people see your face and they talk to you. And then, as you mentioned before, there's a WhatsApp group, and people ask me if they can be added to the WhatsApp group, just so you don't get a lot of spam. But then there's people coming to the beach like, oh, you are that guy. Like, oh yeah, I'm just a guy, but I happen to run the WhatsApp group. But it's in the end, you can do it in the evening, you can do it on the way to work, you can do it in a bit of downtime. Like there's not, except for the questions that people ask you, there's not that much work to be done. It's kite drinks once a month, being present on the beach as much as you can, because you want to do it anyway, and then help people get into the sport, but with the network of teachers and network of whatever and good information. It's easy to channel that kind of information as well.
And along your journey, I'm sure you've faced many challenges with kiting. Do you want to talk to some of the biggest ones that you face and that somebody new to the sport is likely to face, and how best to approach them?
I think the biggest challenge is to find people to go kiting with, which is not easy if you come into something new. There's a lot of information online available, but when you start something new, it's hard to find things. Like you can Google stuff, but a lot of things happens in groups. Yeah. And a lot of things are sort of more close groups, also because of the spam and the non-commercial kind of element to it. So, and it's a sport you have to do with someone else, and then that's probably the biggest challenge to get going into a sport, even if you had some lessons to continue doing it where you live. And then therefore we are running those clubs, and that's why we're there. Therefore I set up the club in New York as well. And then the second thing, of course, it's an expensive sport. So it's not for everybody. It costs you a set, like a new set, will cost you $3,000. You can get cheap stuff second hand, but it's still a lot of money. Like you're still looking at $1,000, which is not for everybody.
Yeah.
There's ways to do it, and some clubs have sort of gear, and I also bring like old gear to Kenya and give it to the local people and the teachers there so they can use it. But if you live in a city like New York or London, it costs money and it's not cheap.
Yeah, and I guess I mean on the first point around the trying to find people to go with, hopefully Journey can help with that. But also, it is like what I did, looking at meetups, looking at Facebook groups, looking at Twitter maybe, or just trying to, once you find that wherever it is, like it was me with those kite drinks. Once you get in, once you find a couple of people, that's all it takes. I think is and then it can grow from there. And the London one is what amazes me the most. That's 1,700 people now. Yeah. When it's an hour and a half, 2 hours from the beach, that just shows the strength of the sport and the community around it.
And it's sort of running itself. Like I think it's since I left, other people took over and have a different approach. And some people say it's better, some people say it's worse. Doesn't matter. Then maybe less things happen, but it was also because I enjoyed organizing it and I loved doing it. I didn't do it because I had to, because I just enjoyed doing it. But then even without that, like it's like people have the WhatsApp groups, the Telegram groups, so they can find each other. And that's the most important thing. You find someone else to go kiting with, someone else you can give a ride to, someone else you can give a ride to, or meet up with on the beach. And therefore, you have new friends, and therefore you go more often.
Yeah.
And people want to go. They're obsessed by it, so they want to go, and people always go. And that's the nice thing about the group and the size of the group, and it's the same as happening now in New York, is that the group is growing as big as it grow bigger and bigger. That there's always one day a week. If there's wind, people will go. People have different kind of jobs, people have different kind of lifestyles. So if there's wind, there's always someone to find. You can find that want to go, and that's you see in London, like that sort of runs itself. It's basically like, hey, look, let's go kiting. Yeah, fine, good.
Yeah, and it is one of those sports that the feeling is so good. And it's so addictive because it's so good that once you get past that initial stage, like with any sport where it's you're learning and you can't stand up yet, but once you get through that and you feel the power of the wind and you're racing through the water, it's pretty inevitable that as long as you can find people that have gone through that they're going to want to go kiting with you. And I think that's a big part of why the community is so strong, is that it's such a fun sport to do.
And the only downside is that it takes a lot of time especially if you don't live on the beach. It costs money, which can be an obstacle, but generally a lot of times life takes over, and then people drop out, and then but they come back again. And maybe 5 years later they all of a sudden have more time and they come again. And it's such a big community that there's something for everybody. So if you're really keen and really passionate about it, you can go all the time. If you just want to do it once in a while, you can do that. If you just want to talk about it over a drink, fine.
Yeah, it's pretty relevant to me what you just said, in that I'm building this thing, and my wife and I have just bought a house, and so I haven't been on the water. But being a part of your WhatsApp group in New York, the NYC Kiters, because I see that constant stream of people doing cool stuff, asking about this sport versus that sport, or I'm going on this trip, it motivates me to really want to get back out there. Whereas if I think about if I didn't see that, I'd still be in the back of my mind, but it's so much more front and center because that community is right there and they're talking about it and they're excited about it.
And it keeps current. Like people give me praise on the WhatsApp group for doing it, but I'm not doing anything. It's them, it's the participants, the members of the WhatsApp, the members of the club who make it. Yeah. They're the ones who go kiting, and then the other people join. And this year for me has been a bit more up and down, in and out, and therefore I haven't been able to go to my local spot, which is sort of New York. But then there's so many other people going. But it's absolutely right, like people sit in the office, They work in One World Trade Center, and they look at people. Oh, they're kiting in Brooklyn or Sandy Hook, and they can basically see the beach from their office.
Yeah, that's right.
And they go, oh, I want to go on this. I want to go this weekend, so I'm gonna actually make an effort now.
Yeah.
Well, if those kind of community kind of tools weren't there, then you sort of forget about it and then do other things, which can also be enjoyable. And maybe the wife will even be more happy if you go have a picnic in Central Park. But it keeps you current, and it keeps you wanting to do it, and you see people going to nice place you want to go to, you see people kiting on your local beaches, and you see people straight gloating and boasting about their newest trick. You're like, oh, he can do this trick, I want to do it as well.
Yeah, exactly. Joris Ankersmit, are you ready for the quick fire? First question, favorite book? Doesn't have to be related to kiting.
Yeah, there's a really cool book, kind of the Barbarian Days. It's like a surfing book.
Okay.
It's a guy who lives somewhere in Upper West here in New York. He's actually part of the surfing club, the sort of the equivalent of the New York City Kiteboarding Club. There's a surfing club, and but it's just it's about surfing. It's about surfing and traveling. It's really not, there's depth to it, and in the way it's written, it's very well. But the whole topic is sort of like for people that don't know about it maybe a bit non-interesting. But the way it's written, the lifestyle, and everything else is great. It's a great kind of read, great kind of feel, and
really resonated with you.
Yeah, and it's like really, you're like, oh, I want to be on that beach. I want to be lying in that hammock. I want to look at that wave. And then he goes surfing. You should want to go kite surfing.
Yeah. So it sounds like you've very much tried to mirror that lifestyle to a certain extent. Okay, favorite movie?
I'm not going to say Point Break. Favorite movie? Okay. I have to think about it. It's a quick fire question, right? I think maybe favorite movie, Star Wars.
Okay, done. Favorite travel destination?
I think Brazil. Brazil for sort of like the country, the people, the beaches, and also the kite surf.
Favorite place to kite?
Maybe Kenya. I think Kenya is always a destination where we go to a lot. Organize a trip there as well, and it has it all. Like, it's not maybe the best spot ever, but it has like it's a beautiful spot. But the wind can be better somewhere else. But you have basically everything. You have the beautiful beach, the water. You have the kiting. You have the African kind of vibe to it. The food. It's just like a really nice place to be, even if there's no wind. And that's for me quite important. If you go to a place, in case there's no wind, I will still have a great time.
Something else to do. And favorite place to relax?
It's probably the beach.